He amassed a fortune, built an empire, and scaled the dizzying heights of power. But 20 years ago, Arthur Sterling made a ruthless choice, abandoning his devoted wife for the cold embrace of ambition. Decades passed, marked by immense success and gnawing emptiness. Then, at a glittering charity gala, his past materialized. The woman he cast aside stood before him, transformed, radiant, and utterly unfamiliar. Yet it was the handsome young man beside her, with eyes mirroring his own, that ignited a terrifying question. Has Arthur Sterling stood on the precipice of a colossal deal, the kind that transformed ordinary businessmen into titans? The air in his opulent penthouse apartment in downtown Manhattan hummed with unspoken possibilities. From his floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds, a reflection of the wealth he craved. Yet despite the dizzying heights of his ambition, a quiet, almost imperceptible ache resided deep within him, a lingering phantom from a life he'd ruthlessly shed. 20 years ago, Arthur wasn't Arthur Sterling, the formidable real estate magnate. He was just Arthur, a driven but struggling entrepreneur, married to Clara Hayes. Their modest home, in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood, was a world away from the gilded cage he now inhabited. Clara was his anchor, his confidant, the steady flame that warmed their humble abode. She believed in him when no one else did, pouring her meager savings into his fledgling ventures, working extra shifts as a kindergarten teacher to keep them afloat. Her laughter, a melody he hadn't heard in years, used to fill their small kitchen. Her hands, soft and calloused from years of caring, were the ones that had wiped away his tears of frustration and held his hand in moments of triumph. But ambition, like a relentless tide, can erode even the strongest foundations. As Arthur's ventures slowly began to gain traction, a new world opened up to him, a world of high-stakes negotiations, glamorous parties, and influential connections. In that world, Clara, with her simple dresses and practical shoes, began to feel like an anchor in a different, more burdensome sense. He started to see her not as his supportive partner, but as a relic of a past he desperately wanted to escape, a reminder of the poverty he swore to transcend. The turning point came with the acquisition of the old industrial complex in Long Island City. It was a monstrous, dilapidated property, but Arthur saw its potential, a vision of luxury, condominiums, and commercial spaces. The deal required an immense amount of capital and, more crucially, an undeniable commitment that would consume his life for years. Clara, ever practical, had voiced her concerns. "Arthur, are you sure about this? It's a huge risk. What about us? What about starting a family like we always planned?" Her words, once a comfort, now sounded like chains. "Family? Clara, do you know what this deal means? This isn't just about us anymore. This is about legacy. This is about real wealth." His voice had been sharp, laced with a resentment that surprised even him. The argument escalated, as many had in those preceding months. He began spending more nights away, claiming long hours at the office, strategic meetings, networking events. Clara, with her gentle spirit, tried to understand, tried to bridge the growing chasm between them. She'd leave warm meals on the stove, send him encouraging texts, even visit his small, chaotic office with homemade cookies, hoping to recapture the easy intimacy they once shared. But each gesture of love felt to Arthur like a subtle form of suffocation. The day he left, the air was heavy with an unspoken finality. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. There were no raised voices, no tears from him. He simply packed a small bag, mostly containing documents and a few changes of clothes, ostensibly for an extended business trip. Clara stood in the doorway of their bedroom, her eyes wide, a silent plea in their depths. "I need space, Clara," he'd said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "This isn't working. I can't build an empire if I'm constantly tethered." He'd expected an outburst, a desperate clinging. Instead, Clara had merely nodded her shoulders, slumping. "I understand, Arthur," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I hope you find what you're looking for." That quiet acceptance, devoid of anger or accusation, had unnerved him more than any fight. He remembered the faint scent of lavender from her sweater as he walked past her, the way the morning light caught the few silver strands in her dark hair. He had not looked back. He got into a waiting taxi, leaving behind not just a wife, but a part of himself he would spend the next 2 decades trying to bury under layers of success. He never called, he never wrote. His lawyers handled the divorce papers, a sterile exchange of legal documents that severed their connection like a surgical blade. Clara had asked for nothing, not a dime of the meager assets they possessed. She only requested that her maiden name Hayes be fully restored to her. Arthur had signed the papers without a second thought, already consumed by the blueprints of his burgeoning empire. Clara Hayes vanished from his life as completely as a dream upon waking. In the ensuing years, Arthur Sterling built Sterling Global Holdings into a monolithic force. Skyscrapers bore his name. His face graced the covers of business magazines. He lived in a world of private jets, exclusive clubs, and a revolving door of stunningly beautiful, equally ambitious women who understood the rules of his game. No messy emotions, no commitment, just fleeting companionship. He acquired properties, companies, and even a minor league baseball team. He became a name synonymous with power, a testament to his ruthless drive. Yet despite the endless pursuit of more, a void persisted. It was a subtle, insidious emptiness, masked by champagne toasts and the roar of the stock market. Sometimes in the dead of night, when the city was quiet and the penthouse was vast and empty, the echo of Clara's gentle laughter would resurface, a ghostly melody he couldn't quite silence. He would dismiss it, attributing it to stress, to the relentless pressure of maintaining his empire. He told himself he had made the right choice, that Clara had been a distraction, a weakness. Success, he reasoned, demanded sacrifice. He had sacrificed Clara, and now he was a king. But the king often dined alone, surrounded by the spoils of a victory that felt increasingly hollow. His circle was filled with sycophants and competitors, people who admired his wealth but never truly saw him. He had no true friends, no family bonds beyond strained, obligatory holiday calls with distant relatives. The women he dated were ornamental, their conversations superficial, their affections conditional on his status. He had built a fortress of wealth, but in doing so, he had walled himself off from genuine connection. Clara, meanwhile, had faced a different reality. The abandonment had shattered her, leaving her adrift in the quiet Brooklyn home that suddenly felt immense and hollow. The initial shock gave way to a profound grief, not just for the loss of a husband, but for the shattering of a shared dream. Yet Clara Hayes was not one to wallow. She possessed an inner strength Arthur had never truly appreciated, a resilience born of quiet determination. The kindergarten job became her lifeline, the children's innocent laughter a balm to her wounded spirit. She picked up extra tutoring gigs, saving every penny. She downsized, moving into a smaller, cozier apartment that still held memories, but fewer, less painful ones. She enrolled in night classes, pursuing a long-held passion for graphic design, a field far removed from the gentle world of teaching. She poured her energy into her studies, finding solace in the precise lines and vibrant colors of her digital creations. Her talent, once dormant, bloomed under the nurturing soil of her newfound independence. She built a small online freelance business, initially taking on minor design projects for local businesses. Her reputation grew, clients praising her creativity, professionalism, and her uncanny ability to translate abstract ideas into compelling visuals. Slowly, painstakingly, Clara began to rebuild her life, brick by emotional brick. She learned to stand on her own, to thrive, not despite Arthur's abandonment, but because of the freedom it paradoxically afforded her. The quiet, gentle woman Arthur had left behind was transforming, hardening in some ways, but blossoming in others. She shed the old skin of dependence, emerging stronger, more self-assured, and with a quiet confidence that shimmered beneath her still gentle exterior. The void Arthur felt was the exact space Clara had filled with purpose and self-discovery. While Arthur Sterling ascended to the pinnacle of financial power, Clara Hayes forged her own path, one paved not with ambition's cold steel, but with the quiet dignity of self-reliance and creative fulfillment. Arthur's life was a whirlwind of international travel board meetings and high-profile negotiations. His days were a blur of power lunches, private jet flights, and the constant hum of a multi-billion-dollar empire demanding his attention. He amassed art collections, invested in vineyards, and acquired luxury vehicles that sat mostly unused in his climate-controlled garage. He became a symbol of unbridled success, his name a byword for audacious deals and relentless acquisition. Yet the hollowness he sometimes felt was a persistent companion. He dated, of course, a succession of elegant, accomplished women. There was Isabella Rossi, a celebrated architect whose sharp mind matched his own, but whose ambition rivaled his, leaving little room for genuine connection. Then came Victoria Chen, a charismatic tech CEO, witty and beautiful, but ultimately as guarded and self-sufficient as Arthur himself. They were relationships of convenience, alliances of power, devoid of the messy, unpredictable emotions that Clara had once effortlessly evoked. He never felt truly seen, truly understood by any of them. He was simply Arthur Sterling, the magnate, a role he played with consummate skill even when the audience was a single, admiring woman across a Michelin-starred dinner table. He convinced himself that this was the price of greatness, the necessary solitude of the king. He worked harder, accumulating more, believing that the sheer volume of his achievements would eventually fill the void. He chased new deals, new markets, new challenges, always pushing forward, never looking back. The past and Clara were meticulously walled off, relegated to a distant, almost forgotten memory, a fleeting shadow in the dazzling glare of his present. Meanwhile, Clara's life, though less publicly celebrated, blossomed with a richness Arthur could never have comprehended. Her freelance graphic design business, Clara Hayes Design, steadily grew. She moved beyond local brochures and small websites, attracting clients from burgeoning tech startups and boutique fashion labels. Her unique aesthetic, clean, elegant, and infused with a subtle warmth, set her apart. She discovered a particular knack for branding, creating entire visual identities that resonated deeply with her clients' visions. She found a small, sun-drenched studio in an artistic enclave of Brooklyn, a place where the scent of coffee and creativity mingled in the air. Her days were spent immersed in her work, transforming concepts into captivating designs. Her evenings were filled with book clubs, art gallery openings, and quiet dinners with a small, cherished circle of friends she had cultivated over the years, people who valued authenticity over ostentation. There was Lena Petrova, a fellow artist, who shared her love for abstract expressionism, and Dr. Samuel Green, a kind retired literature professor, who introduced her to new worlds through his vast collection of books. Clara also pursued other passions. She took up pottery, finding a meditative calm in shaping clay with her hands. She volunteered at a local animal shelter, her quiet compassion a comfort to the abandoned creatures there. Her life was filled with purpose, creativity, and genuine human connection. She found joy in the small things, a perfectly brewed cup of tea, the vibrant colors of an autumn leaf, the satisfaction of a challenging design project brought to fruition. She was content, truly content, a state of being Arthur had long since forgotten, perhaps never even known. One of the most significant shifts in Clara's life, however, came in a quiet, unexpected way. While working on a website redesign for a non-profit organization dedicated to fostering young artistic talent, she met Dr. David Mitchell. David was a soft-spoken, brilliant art historian serving on the non-profit's board. Their initial interactions were purely professional, but soon shared passions for art literature, and quiet evenings spent discussing ideas began to weave a different tapestry. David was everything Arthur wasn't: patient, kind, deeply empathetic, and utterly uninterested in material wealth beyond comfortable living. He saw Clara, truly saw her, beyond her past, beyond her talents. He saw the resilience in her eyes, the warmth in her smile, the depth of her spirit. Their relationship unfolded slowly, deliberately, a stark contrast to the whirlwind romances Arthur engaged in. David was a steady presence, a gentle hand, a listening ear. He brought a calm stability to Clara's life, a sense of partnership she hadn't realized she was still yearning for. After 5 years of quiet companionship, they married in a small, intimate ceremony at a botanical garden surrounded by their closest friends. Clara Hayes became Clara Hayes Mitchell, and with that hyphenation, a new chapter firmly rooted in love and stability began. Arthur, oblivious to these developments, continued his relentless march. He was in the news constantly, acquiring a controlling stake in a major tech firm, launching a luxury hotel chain in Dubai, even dabbling in space tourism ventures. His net worth swelled into the tens of billions. He had achieved the ultimate pinnacle of success. Yet the persistent void remained a low, dull throb beneath the roar of his achievements. He found himself increasingly isolated, trapped in a gilded cage of his own making. The few times he allowed himself to reflect, a vague sense of unease would creep in, a fleeting question about the path not taken, the life he had discarded. But he would quickly push it away, burying it under another acquisition, another deal, another grand declaration of his invincibility. He was reaching an age where men began to consider legacy beyond balance sheets. Friends from his university days, those he still occasionally saw at exclusive charity galas, spoke of grandchildren, of quieter pursuits, of finding meaning outside the relentless grind. Arthur had no children, no direct heir to his empire. The thought sometimes pricked him, a sharp, unwelcome needle. He had always envisioned a son, a younger version of himself, to inherit his domain. But the demands of his career had always superseded such domestic aspirations. He had chosen ambition, and ambition had proven to be a jealous mistress, consuming everything else. He sometimes wondered about Clara, not with regret, but with a detached curiosity, like one might wonder about a character in a long-forgotten novel. Was she happy? Had she married? He imagined she had settled into a quiet provincial life, perhaps still teaching kindergarten, living a simple existence, unaware of the dazzling heights he had scaled. The thought, he told himself, confirmed his choice. He had soared, while she, he presumed, had merely endured. He couldn't have been more wrong. The universe, however, has a peculiar way of orchestrating encounters, of weaving forgotten threads back into the tapestry of life. Arthur, for all his power, was merely a pawn in this grand design. The stage was being set for a confrontation, a collision of past and present that would shatter his carefully constructed world and force him to confront the ghost of the woman he abandoned and the life he never truly knew. The threads, thin and invisible, were drawing tighter, leading him unknowingly towards a moment that would redefine everything he thought he knew about success, sacrifice, and the enduring power of love. The annual Sterling Global Holdings Charity Gala was not merely an event. It was Arthur Sterling's personal kingdom, a dazzling microcosm of his dominion over the financial world. Tonight, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel shimmered with 1,000 facets of New York's elite. Crystal chandeliers, heavy with centuries of history, cast a warm golden glow over a sea of bespoke suits and haute couture gowns. The air, thick with the expensive perfumes of ambition and success, hummed with the murmur of influential conversations, punctuated by the clinking of champagne flutes and the subdued strains of a string quartet. This was Arthur's stage, and he, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored midnight blue tuxedo, was the undisputed monarch. He moved through the throng with the practiced ease of a seasoned diplomat, a charming, almost effortless smile playing on his lips. His eyes, though, remained sharp, assessing every handshake, every murmured compliment, every fleeting glance for opportunity or threat. He spoke to a formidable real estate rival about a potential joint venture in Southeast Asia, then smoothly transitioned to discussing art acquisitions with a prominent gallery owner, all while subtly guiding the flow of conversation, subtly asserting his influence. He felt entirely in his element, a master of this glittering universe, utterly self-assured in the vastness of his achievements. He was halfway through a polite, if tedious, exchange with Senator Beatrice Monroe, a powerful figure in Washington, known for her dry wit and even drier tax policies. They were discussing the intricacies of upcoming corporate tax reforms, a conversation that usually commanded his full, unwavering attention. Yet, as the senator droned on about legislative amendments, Arthur's gaze, typically so disciplined in its focus, drifted absently across the packed room, sweeping over the faces he knew and those he merely recognized from the society pages. And then his eyes snagged. By the grand marble fireplace, where a group of guests had coalesced, stood a woman. She was speaking animatedly, her head tilted slightly, and her laughter, clear and melodious, cut distinctly through the polished din of the ballroom. The sound itself was like a forgotten chord, struck deep within him, a faint, unsettling echo from a distant past he had carefully compartmentalized. It was a unique timbre, instantly recognizable to a part of his mind he thought long since dormant. He frowned, a tiny crease forming between his brows. He dismissed it instantly. A trick of the acoustics, perhaps. He rarely, almost never thought of her anymore, and certainly not here amidst the glittering faces of his current, meticulously curated life. The thought of Clara Hayes, the quiet schoolteacher from Brooklyn, inhabiting this opulent space was absurd. Yet, a subtle, insistent pull, an almost primal curiosity, compelled him to look closer, to truly register the figure by the fireplace. The woman turned, slightly shifting her weight, and for the first time, her profile was fully visible. Her hair no longer just a simple dark shade, was now a lustrous chestnut, styled in soft, elegant waves that framed a face that had matured with an extraordinary grace. Lines of laughter, not worry, crinkled around her eyes, and her smile, as she responded to something said by another guest, was radiant, brimming with genuine warmth and an inner serenity that struck him with profound force. It was undeniably her, Clara, Clara Hayes. His breath hitched a sharp intake of air that went unnoticed by the senator still speaking beside him. He felt a sudden disorienting lurch, as if the solid marble floor beneath him had dropped several feet. This wasn't the Clara he remembered. The quiet, slightly faded woman he'd abandoned, whom he had, in his own arrogant estimations, presumed had withered in his absence. This Clara exuded an aura of calm confidence, a sophisticated elegance that transcended simple beauty, radiating from within rather than being applied. She wore a deep emerald green gown, a shade that brought out the warmth in her complexion, and it shimmered subtly under the chandeliers, accentuating her graceful figure without being ostentatious. Around her neck, a delicate silver necklace caught the light, a simple piece that seemed to highlight her natural elegance rather than define it. A tight, cold knot formed in his stomach. How was she here in this exclusive circle at his charity gala? Who had invited her? His mind raced, struggling desperately to reconcile the faded, almost spectral Clara of his memory with the vibrant, self-possessed woman before him. The dissonance was jarring, threatening to unravel the carefully constructed narrative of his past. He was about to excuse himself abruptly from Senator Monroe, his composure rapidly fraying, when another figure stepped into his view, drawing his attention with an almost visceral, sickening jolt. Standing beside Clara, his hand casually, intimately resting on the small of her back as she laughed, was a young man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a confident yet approachable bearing that spoke of quiet strength and inner poise. And then Arthur saw his face. A shock of dark hair, styled perhaps a little more loosely, but undeniably the same rich, deep shade as his own. A strong, defined jawline, uncannily similar in its angularity to his own. But it was the eyes that truly froze him, deep-set, intelligent eyes, a distinctive shade of hazel that had always been Arthur's most commented-upon feature, inherited directly from his paternal line. The young man's gaze met Clara's, and a tender, intimate smile, full of mutual affection, passed between them, a silent communication of deep connection. The world seemed to tilt violently on its axis, and the polished drone of the gala faded into a distant, muffled hum. Arthur felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a premonition so powerful and terrifying it stole the air from his lungs. This young man, he looked so much like him. But not the current aged Arthur, with the lines of stress and cynicism etched around his eyes and mouth. He looked like the Arthur of 25 years ago, before ambition had consumed him, before the relentless pursuit of wealth had hardened his features. He looked like the son Arthur had once vaguely dreamed of, a phantom limb ache in his heart that he hadn't realized still existed. He mumbled a hasty, barely coherent apology to Senator Monroe, who looked at him with mild surprise and stumbled away from their conversation. His eyes remained fixed, almost hypnotized, on Clara and the young man. He needed answers. He needed to know with a desperate, soul-crushing urgency. He moved through the throng, pushing past bewildered guests. His usual smooth composure shattered a single, desperate question, echoing like a death knell in his mind. Who is he? Just then, he saw another figure approach the pair. It was Clara's husband, David Mitchell, a distinguished-looking man, slightly older than Clara, with an air of quiet, academic authority, kind eyes, and a gentle smile that seemed to radiate genuine warmth. David placed a hand reassuringly on Clara's arm, and she turned to him, her face lighting up with an expression of profound affection and contentment that Arthur had never fully witnessed during their own marriage. A wave of unexpected jealousy, sharp, potent, and utterly humiliating, coursed through Arthur. This was her husband. This was the man who had given her the life she now lived, the happiness Arthur had denied her, the stability he had ridiculed. He watched paralyzed as David Mitchell embraced the young man, a familial gesture of paternal warmth. The young man, in turn, embraced David, a genuine affection and respect evident in his actions, in the way he leaned into the embrace. They were a family, a complete loving unit. A family Arthur had no part, in a family where a young man, who looked startlingly like him, was a cherished integral member. He needed to get closer to hear their names, to somehow confirm or deny this terrifying, increasingly likely suspicion. He feigned a detour towards a nearby bar, his movements stiff, unnatural. As he navigated the edge of the group, pretending to admire a large, vibrant, abstract painting, he strained to listen. He heard Clara's voice, clear and warm, resonating with a comfortable familiarity. "David, darling, I was just telling Ethan about the new sustainable architecture project. He's so excited to contribute." Ethan. The name solidified the image, slamming into him with the force of a physical blow. The young man was Ethan. Ethan Mitchell Hayes. The last name wasn't immediately apparent in the snippets of conversation, but the first name, combined with the striking resemblance, sent a shiver down Arthur's spine that had nothing to do with the cool air conditioning. He managed to catch the eye of a long-time associate, Mr. Harrison Davies, a jovial, corpulent public relations guru known for his encyclopedic knowledge of New York society. Harrison, noticing Arthur's unusually rigid posture, lumbered over. "Arthur, old chap, wonderful gala as always. The senator was just telling me about your latest philanthropic endeavor." Arthur forced a casual tone, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Harrison, good to see you," he managed, trying to keep his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Say, who is that lovely woman over by the fireplace, with the gentleman and the young man? They seem quite prominent, but I can't quite place them." He tried to make it sound like an idle passing curiosity. Harrison peered over his half-moon reading glasses, his eyes twinkling. "Ah, Clara Hayes Mitchell, a truly remarkable woman, Arthur, elegant, sharp, and with an incredible eye. She runs a highly successful design firm, Clara Hayes Design, you know. Been making quite a name for herself in the sustainable design sector. And that's her husband, Dr. David Mitchell, a renowned art historian at NYU. Very philanthropic, both of them, deeply involved in community arts. Salt of the earth, those two." Harrison paused, then gestured towards Ethan. "And the young man? That's their son, Ethan Mitchell. Just graduated from Yale, first-class honors, I hear. Brilliant kid heading into sustainable architecture, following in his stepfather's footsteps with that passion for heritage and the built environment, but with a modern twist, of course. Son." The word hit Arthur like a physical blow, a concussive shockwave that reverberated through his entire being. Their son, Ethan Mitchell. But he looked so much like him. His mind reeled frantically, trying to piece together a fragmented timeline. Clara had given birth after their divorce, he was sure of it. Or was she? The precise dates blurred in his memory, obscured by 2 decades of relentless, self-serving ambition. He remembered Clara wanting children, their shared dream. A dream he had repeatedly deferred, always focusing on his career, always prioritizing the next deal. He had been so utterly consumed by his own ascent that he hadn't even considered the possibility that her life might continue, might even flourish, without him. A cold, horrifying realization began to dawn, a truth so devastating it threatened to shatter his carefully constructed identity. What if Ethan wasn't David Mitchell's son by blood? What if Ethan was his son? A son he had abandoned unknowingly, along with his wife and their shared future. The thought was unbearable, a searing, nauseating pain in his chest that overshadowed even his deepest financial losses, a pain more profound than any failed venture. This was a loss he could not mitigate with a shrewd acquisition or a hostile takeover. He muttered another vague excuse to Harrison, his voice a strained whisper, and retreated, seeking the temporary reprieve of the men's room. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to clear the fog of disbelief and terror. He had to know. He had to get closer to Ethan, to study his features, to find definitive proof, to somehow confirm or deny this gut-wrenching suspicion that had taken root in his very soul. He returned to the ballroom, now moving with a predatory, desperate focus. He walked past Clara and David, feigning a detour to the bar. As he passed, he caught a snippet of Ethan's voice, clear, confident, and infused with youthful energy. "Mom, Dad, I'm just going to grab a drink. Anyone need anything, Mom, Dad?" The casual affection in Ethan's voice, the effortless way he included both Clara and David, was like a knife twisting in an open wound. This was his family. This was the life Arthur had rejected, the warmth and connection he had traded for cold, glittering success. He went to the bar, ordered a stiff scotch, the neat liquid burning a path down his throat. He needed a plan. He couldn't just accost Clara after 2 decades, not here, not now, not with this devastating secret hanging between them. But he couldn't walk away either. Not with this nagging, terrifying question, this possibility that was consuming him. He remembered a small, distinctive mark just beneath his left earlobe, a tiny dark mole he had inherited from his own father, a genetic signature passed down through generations. It was a minor detail, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but in his current state of desperate certainty, it seemed like the undeniable key to unlocking this agonizing mystery. He had to see Ethan up close, unobserved, to look for that mark. He spent the rest of the evening lurking, observing his gaze, returning repeatedly to Ethan. He watched him as he moved through the gala, engaging in conversations with a natural charm and intelligence that belied his youth. He saw Clara laughing, her eyes sparkling, truly happy. He saw David Mitchell watching her with an expression of profound adoration, a quiet, solid love that spoke louder than any grand gesture. And he saw Ethan, his gestures, his mannerisms, his confident way of holding himself eerily familiar, echoing Arthur's own movements from a lifetime ago. The thought that this vibrant, intelligent, well-adjusted young man could be his son, a son he had never known, never nurtured, never even acknowledged, was a tormenting, suffocating weight in his chest. As the gala began its slow, graceful winding down, Arthur spotted Ethan making his way towards the coat check, perhaps preparing to leave. This was his chance. It was now or never. He moved quickly, his steps urgent, almost stumbling in his haste, intercepting the young man just as he reached the counter. "Excuse me?" Arthur said, his voice surprisingly steady, almost devoid of the tremor he felt inside. "Ethan, isn't it? I'm Arthur Sterling. I believe I know your mother Clara." He tried to sound casual, interested, the magnate simply making an acquaintance. Ethan turned his hazel eyes so strikingly like Arthur's own, widening slightly in polite surprise. "Mr. Sterling," he said, extending a polite, firm hand. His grip was confident, strong, a mirror of Arthur's own. "Yes, Ethan Mitchell. It's a pleasure to meet you. My mum speaks very highly of your foundation's philanthropic work." Arthur feigned a gracious, practiced smile, feeling like a predator in sheep's clothing. "The pleasure is entirely mine, Ethan," he replied, his voice a little hoarse, barely controllable. "Your mother?" "Yes. Clara and I knew each other many, many years ago. It's truly wonderful to see her doing so remarkably well. You've clearly grown into a remarkable young man. Harrison Davies mentioned you just graduated from Yale Sustainable Architecture," he said, as Ethan spoke, detailing his studies, his aspirations, his passion for environmentally conscious design. His youthful enthusiasm was infectious, and Arthur found himself listening with a desperate intensity, not to the words, but to the subtle movements of Ethan's head, the angle of his face. He subtly angled himself, leaning in slightly, trying to get a better, unobstructed view of Ethan's left earlobe. His heart hammered in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. The ballroom noise faded again, replaced by the deafening sound of his own pulse. It was there, a small dark mole, precisely positioned just beneath the lobe, exactly where Arthur's own was, exactly where his father's had been. The same size, the same shade, the same subtle curve of the skin around it. The world went silent, then exploded. The sounds of the bustling gala, the polite chatter, the distant music, all of it faded into an incomprehensible, meaningless hum. All Arthur could see, all he could focus on, was that tiny, ordinary mark, a silent, irrefutable testimony. Ethan Mitchell was not just a young man who looked like him. Ethan Mitchell was his son, a son he had abandoned unknowingly, along with the woman who had once been the quiet, enduring center of his life. A wave of nausea, cold and acidic, washed over him, followed by a profound, soul-crushing regret, so immense it brought him to his knees internally. 20 years. 20 years of a life he had never known, a bond he had never forged, a family he had willingly, ruthlessly discarded for the hollow pursuit of power. He had chosen money, isolated power, and the illusion of success over a life that had clearly blossomed into something beautiful and complete. Without him, a life filled with purpose and genuine connection. The bitter irony of it all was a cruel, agonizing twist of the knife slicing through his carefully constructed defenses. He managed to stammer out a few more strained pleasantries, his mind reeling his words, feeling alien in his own mouth. He ended the conversation abruptly, his urgency barely concealed. He shook Ethan's hand again, his grip tight, almost desperate, clinging to this fleeting, unbearable connection. "It was truly a pleasure, Ethan," he said, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. "A great, great pleasure." He walked away, leaving a slightly bewildered Ethan Mitchell behind, and plunged back into the swirling anonymity of the receding crowd, seeking only escape. The city lights, once a symbol of his triumph, of his boundless reach, now seemed to mock him, their dazzling brilliance, illuminating the desolate, empty landscape of his own making. The ghost of Clara, the woman he had abandoned, had returned not as a faded memory, but as a vibrant, undeniable reality, holding the hand of a son he never knew he had. His carefully constructed world, His empire of solitude had just begun to crumble around him, leaving him adrift in a sea of belated, overwhelming regret. The revelation of Ethan's identity, his son, the one he had unknowingly abandoned, sent Arthur Sterling into a spiraling descent. The meticulous order of his life, built on calculated risks and cold ambition, was shattered. He locked himself in his penthouse, cancelling meetings, ignoring calls. The city outside, once his playground, now felt like a suffocating cage. The image of Ethan's face, a younger, purer version of his own, haunted his waking hours and infiltrated his restless sleep. He was tormented by questions: how, when, why had Clara never told him? The answers he knew lay with Clara, the woman he had so callously discarded. But confronting her after 2 decades with this monstrous secret felt like an impossible task. Shame, a feeling he rarely experienced, gnawed at him. He, Arthur Sterling, the man who commanded empires, was reduced to a trembling, guilt-ridden shell. He finally called Harrison Davies again, his voice strained. "Harrison, I need a deep dive. Clara Hayes Mitchell, everything. Her background, her business, her family, her son." Discreetly. Harrison, surprised by the urgency in Arthur's tone, promised to deliver. Within days, a comprehensive dossier landed on Arthur's desk. He devoured it, each page a fresh wound. Clara's design firm was indeed highly successful, specializing in sustainable branding for eco-conscious businesses, a far cry from his own predatory real estate ventures. Her marriage to David Mitchell was a testament to stability and mutual respect. And then, there it was, a detailed timeline of Ethan's birth. Ethan, born 6 months after their divorce was finalized. Clara had been pregnant when he left, pregnant with his child. The truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had not only abandoned his wife, he had abandoned his unborn son. Clara's quiet acceptance, her whispered, "I hope you find what you're looking for," now echoed with heartbreaking clarity. She had known. She had carried his secret, his child, alone, and built a beautiful life without him. The depth of her strength and the unforgivable magnitude of his cruelty overwhelmed him. He needed to see her. He needed to apologize, to explain, though he knew no explanation could ever suffice. He found her studio address in the dossier, a charming, light-filled space in Brooklyn. He drove there, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his heart a drum against his ribs. Clara was at her desk, engrossed in a design project, when he walked in. The chime of the bell above the door made her look up, her eyes still hazel, but now holding a steely glint he hadn't seen before, widened in disbelief. "Arthur," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the melodic laughter he'd heard at the gala. "What are you doing here?" He stood awkwardly, dwarfed by the vibrant artwork on the walls, feeling like an intruder in a sanctuary. "Clara," he began, his voice hoarse, I saw you at the gala, and Ethan." A flicker of understanding, quickly veiled, crossed her face. "Ethan is my son," she stated, her tone a clear warning. "He's my son too, isn't he?" Arthur blurted out, the words escaping before he could temper them. He has the mole. I know." Clara stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then a sigh escaped her lips, heavy with years of unspoken history. "Yes, Arthur," she said quietly. "He's your son." The confession, though expected, still ripped through him. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep him from me? Keep him from you?" Clara's voice, though still soft, now vibrated with a barely contained anger. Arthur, you left. You walked out the door without a backward glance. You cut me out of your life completely. You thought I was a burden, a hindrance to your ambition. What was I supposed to do? Chase you down? Beg you to acknowledge a child you clearly didn't want when you couldn't even acknowledge me? Her words were precise, each one a perfectly aimed dart. He flinched. I didn't know you were pregnant. If I had, you wouldn't have cared, Arthur. You were obsessed with your empire. A baby would have been just another distraction. You weren't ready to be a father. You weren't ready to be a husband. You weren't ready to be a man. Her eyes flashed with an old pain quickly extinguished by a hardened resolve. Besides, David is his father. He raised him, loved him, taught him everything. He's been the father Ethan deserves, the one you could never be. The mention of David, always loving, always present, twisted the knife deeper. I want to explain, Arthur pleaded. I want to make amends. I want to know him, my son. Clara scoffed, a bitter sound. After 20 years, after he's grown into a remarkable young man, thanks to David's love and guidance, you think you can just waltz back into his life and claim him. You gave up that right the day you walked out. Please, Clara, he begged, his voice cracking. I've made so many mistakes. I regret it. Every day. My life. It's empty. All this, he gestured vaguely at his vast, unseen empire. It means nothing without family, without him. Clara looked at him, then a long, assessing gaze that seemed to strip away all his carefully constructed defenses. Empty, Arthur. Is that why you finally come? Not for Ethan, but for yourself, because your grand empire doesn't fill the void you created. Her voice was laced with a chilling disappointment. That sounds like your problem, not ours. No, he insisted, desperation coloring his tone. No, it's not just for me. I see what kind of man Ethan is. He's everything I wish I had been. He's kind, intelligent, passionate, and he's my son. I deserve to know him. He deserves to know his biological father, even if it's a flawed man like me. Clara sighed again, running a hand through her hair. Ethan knows, she said, surprising him. He's always known. We never kept it a secret from him. David and I told him the truth when he was old enough to understand, gently, carefully. We told him about his biological father who left before he was born. We also made sure he knew how much he was loved by the father who chose to raise him. Arthur felt a fresh wave of agony. Ethan knew, and still he had embraced David as his father. The rejection, though unspoken by Ethan, was palpable. I need to talk to him, Arthur said, his voice barely a whisper. Just once. To apologize. To explain. To thank you, Clara, for raising him into the man he is. Clara looked at him, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. I can't promise anything, Arthur. Ethan is an adult. It's his decision. But I will talk to David, and then I will talk to Ethan. Don't expect miracles, and don't expect him to accept you into his life overnight, if at all. He nodded, a profound sense of gratitude, mixed with his lingering despair. Thank you, Clara. That's all I can ask. He left her studio, the weight of the world on his shoulders, but with a sliver of hope, fragile as a spiderweb. He spent the next few days in agonizing anticipation, waiting for a call that might never come. He replayed every moment with Ethan at the gala, searching for signs, for a flicker of recognition, a hint that their connection was more than just physical resemblance. A week later, his phone rang. It was Clara. Ethan will meet you, she said, her voice still neutral. At a neutral location, my choice. This Friday, 6 p.m. at the Greenhaven Cafe on Elm Street. Just you and him. No expectations, Arthur. The Greenhaven Cafe was a quaint, unassuming spot, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the quiet hum of conversation. Arthur arrived early, his heart pounding. Ethan was already there, sitting at a corner table, nursing a cup of tea. He looked up as Arthur approached, his gaze steady, unwavering. "Ethan," Arthur said, taking the seat opposite him. "Mr. Sterling," Ethan replied, his tone polite but distant. "Please call me Arthur." He paused, gathering his courage. "Ethan, I know you know. About me. About our connection." Ethan nodded slowly. "My mom and David told me when I was about 10. They were very open about it. They said you were a man who made difficult choices, and that those choices meant you wouldn't be part of our lives." His words were calm, devoid of anger, but imbued with a quiet dignity that was devastating. "I made a terrible mistake, Ethan." Arthur began, his voice thick with emotion. "I was young, foolish, blinded by ambition. I didn't see what I had in Clara. I didn't see you. I wish I could go back and change it, but I can't. All I can do is apologize. From the bottom of my heart, I am so deeply, truly sorry for abandoning you, for not being there, for not being the father you deserved." He looked directly into Ethan's eyes, trying to convey the enormity of his regret. Ethan listened, his expression unreadable. "I've had a wonderful father in David," Ethan finally said, his voice soft but firm. "He taught me everything important. He was there for every scraped knee, every school play, every heartbreak. He's my dad. And Mum, she's the strongest, most incredible woman I know. They built a life together, a beautiful one, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it." "I know." Arthur whispered the words, a bitter taste in his mouth. "And I see that, and I thank them for it. For giving you such a wonderful life, for raising you to be you." A long silence stretched between them, punctuated by the clinking of coffee cups. Arthur felt tears prick his eyes, tears he hadn't shed in decades. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Ethan," Arthur continued, "or to accept me into your life. But I wanted you to hear it directly from me. The regret is immense. The loss, it's unbearable. You are a truly exceptional young man. And seeing you, knowing you, has made me realize the true cost of what I chased." Ethan finally looked at him, a faint, almost imperceptible shift in his expression. "I don't hate you, Arthur," he said, his voice quiet. "I understand that people make mistakes, big ones. My life has been good. I'm happy. I have a family who loves me unconditionally." He paused. "And while I appreciate your apology and your honesty, I don't think I have space for another father in my life right now. The one I have is enough." The words, delivered without malice, but with unwavering certainty, were a final, crushing blow. Arthur had hoped for a crack, a tiny opening. But Ethan's boundaries were clear, his loyalty unwavering. "I understand," Arthur said, the defeat heavy in his voice. "Thank you for meeting with me, Ethan. Truly, it means a great deal." He knew this was it. His chance, fleeting as it was, had passed. He had found his son, but he had lost him too, 20 years ago. As he stood to leave, Ethan reached across the table, picked up a small, hand-painted ceramic coaster, a pottery piece, and pushed it gently towards Arthur. "My mom made this," Ethan said. "She's an incredible artist. It's a reminder that beauty can come from unexpected places, even from broken pieces." Arthur took the coaster, his fingers tracing the delicate pattern. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes. Clara forging beauty from the fragments of her shattered past. He looked at Ethan one last time, his son, a reflection of both his greatest regret and the enduring power of a love he had abandoned. As Arthur walked out of the Greenhaven Cafe, the setting sun cast long shadows over Elm Street. The empire he had built seemed less impressive, now less substantial. The true wealth, he realized, wasn't measured in billions, but in the laughter shared, the quiet moments of connection, the love nurtured and returned. He had spent his life chasing shadows, only to discover too late that the true light had always been just beyond his grasp in the life he had discarded. He had found his son, yes, but the bitter irony was that he had only found him to acknowledge the profound, unbridgeable chasm he himself had created. The millionaire who had abandoned his wife had indeed seen her with a young man who looked like him, and in that agonizing recognition, he had finally seen the full, devastating cost of his choices. He was left with an empire and an unbearable emptiness, a king truly alone on his throne. What a heart-wrenching journey, revealing the profound costs of ambition and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Arthur Sterling's story is a stark reminder that true wealth isn't always measured in dollars, but in the bonds we forge and the love we nurture. Clara's quiet strength and Ethan's unwavering loyalty show us that new beginnings can truly blossom from unexpected places. If this tale touched your heart, stirred your emotions, or made you reflect on your own life choices, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a powerful reminder about what truly matters, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that explore the depths of human experience. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.